Good afternoon and welcome to the Gooch Performing Arts Center for our GPAC Talkback Thursday. I'm Amy Miller, Director of Programming and Education. So excited to be back on one of these talkbacks and very excited to welcome the wonderful clarinetist, David Shifrin. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Amy.
It's
fun already.
Yeah, we've been talking for a little while, setting up for this, and excited to have a wonderful conversation over the next 30 minutes or so. And just a reminder, there will be people kind of joining us over the next 30 minutes. So we're excited to see you all. We're excited to welcome you to this talk back. And we'll be having a conversation about what's coming up here at GPAC. So unfortunately, we can't have you in person, David. I know someday in the future, hopefully the near future. But to give you all a background, the reason that David is on with us today is because he is the feature artist in our first performance. That's a series of 3 this fall that we're streaming in partnership with Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, their First Row National program. As you can see, the info is right below at your screen. And we are going to be streaming 3 curated performances that we've been partnering with the Auburn Chamber Music Society members on. We will have 3 over the next 3 months. So 1 in September, 1 in October, 1 in November. They begin streaming on the second Wednesday of those months. So our first one, our program featuring David Shifrin, starts this next week, Wednesday, September 9th at 7:30 p.m. And we'll be here watching it from the Gooch Center. We would love for you all to join and help us spread the word, to join us that night via our virtual streaming, since we can't be here at the Gooch Center together. And just to let you all know that are joining us, you do need to register for a ticket. It's free. All of these performances are free, but you will need to RSVP, register for a ticket on our website. It's right down at the bottom. You can go to goochcenter.auburn.edu to register. And I'll remind you a little later of that as well. So David, I'm going to give everyone a little bit of a background about you so we know who we're talking with today. Okay. So to let you all know, the wonderful David Shifrin, he's a Yale University faculty member since 1987. He's been a clarinetist and artistic director of Yale's Chamber Music Society and Yale in New York, an annual concert series at Carnegie Hall. He has performed with the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center since 1982 and served as its artistic director from 1992 to 2004. He has been the artistic director of Chamber Music Northwest in Portland, Oregon since 1981. He's the winner of the renowned Avery Fisher Prize. He is also the recipient of a solo recitalist fellowship from the NEA, the National Endowment of the Arts. It's wonderful. He has held principal clarinet positions in numerous orchestras, including the Cleveland Orchestra and the American Symphony. He has collaborated with numerous highly talented string quartets around the globe, toured around the globe. And you also have 3 recordings that were Grammy nominated. So thank you for being here with us today, David.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So let's just dig in. I would love for everyone to hear about this illustrious career you've had. It's just an honor seeing what an incredible representative of the clarinet and the classical genre you've been across our globe. Can you share some of your highlights, maybe some regarding your time with Lincoln Center?
Absolutely. Well, you hit a lot of the high points already, and I thank you for that. But you mentioned 1982 as my first performance with the Chamber Music Society. My first experience with Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center was as a student coming to the very first year of concerts at Alice Tully Hall. And I remember thinking, now that's what I want to do when I grow up. This was in the 1969. They opened the Alice Tully Hall as a constituent home of the Chamber Music Society. And a few years later, in 1982, my first concert with them was really a memorable one because it was a birthday celebration for Alice Tully, who turned 80 in 1982. And it was a gala concert with all kinds of wonderful musicians, and I was starstruck to be on that stage. And then 10 years later, I became the artistic director, and once again, we celebrated Alice Tully's birthday when she turned 90. And it was my first big concert at the Chamber Music Society. And I never had it so easy being able to have my phone calls answered in order to celebrate Alice Tully Hall, who was the founder of the Chamber Music Society and very well known in artistic circles in New York and around the globe. Mm-hmm. So much so that I was able to call up Isaac Stern and Yo-Yo Ma and Andre Previn and so many other artists who all said, "Oh yeah, I'll be there." Probably the date is not difficult to remember, unfortunately, because it was on September 11th, and when she was born. But we celebrated her birthday with this all-star cast, and that was my induction into organizing concerts at Lincoln Center for the Chamber Music Society. And I got a very unrealistic view of how easy it was or difficult it was to get all of these phenomenal household name artists to answer the phone and come play chamber music with us.
Yeah.
So
that's very special.
It was memorable.
Yes, almost coming full circle to a certain degree.
Yeah, I've been involved with the organization in many different ways, but for me, it's always been centered around playing the clarinet, and I'm still doing that thanks to David and Wuhan inviting me back. They were my successors as artistic directors and have really, really distinguished themselves in that role.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'll hear from them a little bit later. We have a clip from them that we'll share. Yeah, wonderful. You just mentioned the clarinet, and obviously one of your main relationships through your lifetime has been with your lovely clarinet. Can you tell us a bit about why the clarinet?
Sure. Yeah, it really is a relationship. It's become an extension of my being, as is the case with instrumentalists who really identify with the instrument they play. Sometimes it just starts out that way, I guess, and sometimes you grow into it. For me, it was instantaneous when I saw the movie The Benny Goodman Story. That was a biopic from the 1950s that I saw in reruns when I was in elementary school. I knew I wanted to play music, and that's how I decided what instrument I was going to play. And in this film, of course, the role of Benny Goodman was played by Steve Allen, who many people will remember as a late night talk show host. And he was also a very talented musician. He really played the clarinet, but the soundtracks were Benny Goodman and others.
He knew what he was doing, right? He could portray it correctly. Very cool.
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, nice.
And of course, the love interest in that movie was Donna Reed, who I think probably was also the motivation for me as a young boy to want to take up the clarinet. Benny Goodman was always trying to impress Donna Reed, who was her character in real life. Benny Goodman's love interest as a young musician was a high society lady in New York society, and so his ambition was to impress her by playing classical music and playing Mozart in Carnegie Hall. And for me, that kind of stuck even more than following in his footsteps as a jazz musician, although I listen more and more to Benny Goodman's jazz music now than I did when I was a kid. And what a genius, and still an inspiration. I heard an interview just a week or two ago with a colleague, Richard Stoltzman, who is a big star of the clarinet. And I was amused to hear him talking about his life and the fact that he also saw that movie, and that got him interested in years ago.
Wow, it's a good thing they made that movie.
A whole generation of clarinetists.
Amazing.
Actually, that's true. Even without the movie,
Yeah.
generations of clarinetists owe a great deal to Benny Goodman.
Amazing. Amazing. So good. And you play a particularly special clarinet, right?
Oh, I do sometimes. Yeah. I mean, all my clarinets are special, really.
Yeah, right. Your baby.
But, the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, which is the piece that was featured in Benny Goodman's story, was written for Mozart's close friend, a clarinetist in the late 18th century Vienna, at a time when the clarinet was brand new. It was an experiment. Before Mozart, there had been no major composers writing concertos and chamber music, or even very many orchestral parts for the clarinet in the orchestra. But Mozart heard some of the early clarinets and decided that he loved the sound and became close friends with leading clarinetists in Vienna. And they worked on the instrument to do different things. And they came up with a really elongated clarinet that could play 5 octaves. And Mozart wrote his concerto for such an instrument. And then the publishers never published it that way because nobody but this one clarinetist in Vienna had such an instrument. Then in the 20th century, several clarinetists in Europe and then in the United States, including myself, realized the technology of mechanics of the instrument had come a long way since 1791, and started having instrument makers build instruments that could play Mozart's original version. So that's the long answer to your question about my having a special clarinet.
That's really special. Yeah. We're going to come back in a little bit. I want to talk about the rep and how you will be playing Mozart on the program. But I want to address, I just want to see how you're doing as well. Of course, we all have artists and our favorite musicians and touring artists on our minds during these times, especially those of you that, you know, a lot of your work aligns with the ensemble, with the chamber, with bringing people together in intimate spaces, and we can't quite do that right now. So how have you been doing through these times, and have you learned to pivot as an artist in any certain way?
Yeah, of course, we all are. And I count myself as being very fortunate. I think it's particularly tough on younger artists who are just starting out and who don't have a regular position. I have a teaching position at a university, and we've begun classes again, most of them on computers. But for concert presenters and audiences, and for musicians who depend on, not only on the financial end, the fees, but just the motivation and the day-to-day inspiration of playing for other people, it's taken a big toll. And of course, we've all looked to different ways to do the things that we've all trained for. And I can't even imagine now of what this would have been like even 10 years ago without the tools that we have with technology. For us to be speaking together today online, it would have been unheard of unless you were in a big studio in the city and I was on a remote studio with a satellite connection. But now everyone has a recording studio and a broadcast studio in their home if they have a fast enough internet connection. And so that has been on all of our minds in terms of how we do music. And I know I personally, and every musician that I've interacted with has learned a great deal about technology in the last 6 months to be able to share music. I know I've been teaching quite a bit with my students on the internet, and we found aspects of that were actually more beneficial than the live lessons that we had, although I'd go back to that in a minute if we could. But the way you can do close-ups and the way you can record what you're doing and instantaneously play it back and listen with a student can see and hear the work that they just played. We can analyze it, and of course, I like to say you can't beat the commute, but
Absolutely.
I never thought I would long for the day when I could drive from my home in Connecticut down the West Side Highway to Lincoln Center, but because that commute gets old fast. But people find ways to do things. We've learned a lot about the technology of recording and editing and doing all kinds of things together. I've been working with a developer who's a faculty member at Indiana University, who has a company that called Cadenza, which is like a much more sophisticated version of Music -1 that I grew up on. The LP read a concerto without the solo part, or a sonata without one of the parts to play along. And that technology on computer has grown and become much more sophisticated, and so it's possible for students and professionals as well to practice music with all of the parts. A single line instrument like the clarinet can get very lonely without playing with strings, without playing with other winds, and without playing with piano. But this is a way to at least simulate that experience, and it's a chance to learn music and study scores and practice repertoire. I think the mindset is that we're staying prepared for when we can come back out into the open and together in person.
Being able to focus in on your individual work, your individual playing, maybe many artists, I've heard that. And of course, we've heard of artists that have recorded entire albums and have released them during these times. It shows how resilient we all are in the arts and around this globe. Maybe before we do that, this would be a good time, why don't we cue over to Wuhan and David Finkel's description from the Chamber Music Society about our upcoming program.
Greetings, I'm David Finkel.
And I am Wuhan.
And together, we are artistic co-directors of the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center.
We're so excited to introduce to you our new digital streaming programs called CMS Front Row National. We have designed these with you, the chamber music lover, in mind.
Though we musicians are eager to return to concert halls and perform live concerts, during this time when that is not possible, we are thrilled to offer you these broadcasts, the next best thing.
At CMS, we are fortunate to have had visionary donors and exceptional digital staff that has allowed us to film performances on our New York stages for the past 10 years in the most outstanding video and audio quality available.
From this priceless archive, we have now created Front Row, an ongoing series of programs celebrating the vast repertoire of chamber music. Each program is carefully curated to give you the most enjoyable experience possible. Alongside the incredible performances, you will also be introduced to our fascinating musicians through short features, interviews, and lively roundtable discussions.
We provide these programs to your local chamber music presenter with the aim of helping them and you to continue sharing your love of chamber music together. Our need to stay connected during the performance shutdown is essential. In fact, we need each other now more than ever.
We invite you to join us by viewing these programs, and in the process, we will all be doing our part to preserve the fabric of chamber music touring and presenting.
See you soon.
Oh, wonderful. Your dear friends, right?
Well done. They have such a talent and of communication and ingenuity and making good things happen.
Awesome. Well, again, we hope to have all of you here in person. at some point in the future. But since we can't this coming week, let's talk a little bit about the program. So when we were looking at the different programs available, all of them are so wonderful. The one what really sparked our interest in this program next week featuring you was the clarinet and the storytelling and accessible, fun vibrance of the clarinet, but also the repertory. The program includes Mozart, Bassi, and Ellington. So between Mozart and Duke Ellington, can you tell us a bit why you curated that program?
Absolutely. Well, I mentioned earlier how the clarinet and its repertoire and its really acceptance into the family of instruments as a soloist in chamber music started with Mozart. And his first really monumental, true masterpiece was this quintet for clarinet and string quartet. The world had never heard anything like it before then. And it's still one of the top few masterpieces of the chamber music repertoire that is played every season all around the world. And we had a wonderful time touring this work. This group, we must have played it 10 or 12 times all over North America before this performance that took place in Alice Tully Hall. So we became a real unit, and we've playing this piece the way Mozart intended it, as a dialogue between 5 musicians, 5 voices. We really internalized that, and it was like having a conversation every time we played it. And I think that comes through in this performance from Lincoln Center. This concert was presented to me as an opportunity by Wuhan and David, as sometimes called a carte blanche concert. What would you like to do, David, if you have a recital? And I wanted to choose really contrasting repertoire from different eras. And in performing the Mozart and the showpiece by Luigi Bassi and music of Duke Ellington, I got to choose very contrasting styles, each from a different century, that illustrate, I think, many of the quality. I can't say all of the qualities because it's endless, of the clarinet, the chameleon of the clarinet that has so many colors, and as you put it so beautifully, is a storyteller. The clarinet can tell stories in all kinds of voices and characters. So the Mozart is a real journey from elegance to really the most tender, beautiful, heartfelt, melodic writing, to really joyous and sometimes even funny juxtaposition of melody and harmony and rhythm. The moving ahead to the Luigi Bassi is a whole new genre that cropped up just a generation after Mozart all over Europe, not just in Vienna, but south in Italy, where Verdi became a big star with his operas, and not everyone could get to La Scala or La Fenice in Venice to hear Verdi's operas, but they were promoted by artists all over Europe in highlight reels. There were no YouTube or DVDs. You couldn't just press a button and see and hear a Verdi opera. So there were transcriptions of all kinds, especially in Central Europe. There were wind bands that would transcribe all these operas of Mozart and Beethoven, and just play all of the highlight arias. But in Italy, virtuoso players like Luigi Bassi, who played first clarinet in La Scala with Verdi conducting on some of his most famous operas, was also a composer. And what he did was write a fantasy based on themes from Rigoletto and several other operas too. But what we're performing is the fantasy set of variations based on 7 or 8 different arias from Rigoletto and elaborating on them, almost kind of a 19th century Italian romantic jazz, because with each tune in an exposition followed by really elaborate quasi improvisation. And it's a chance to enjoy Verdi's arias from his opera, and then for the instrumentalist to share the fun of just dancing all around them and having these virtuoso variations to play. And there's always a moment where the fireworks stop and there's a heartfelt aria extended, usually in the minor key, and then something even more dazzling to close out. And it's a genre where there were probably hundreds of works like this for the entire operatic literature for different instruments. You know, you hear Sarasate's variations on Bizet's Carmen, you hear all of these clarinet, you hear flute players, you hear the whole idea, I think, that was attractive to the opera composers was to promote their operas, because not everyone could get to the opera house, and for instrumentalists to promote their virtuosity.
Okay, it was a marriage of those two.
Yeah. And composers almost always have relationships with performers that inspire or in some way influence them to write for that instrument or that player. And that was definitely the case in the mid 20th century for Duke Ellington, who was truly one of the greats of American music of any kind, and had a tremendous output of composition, great genius. And fortunately for clarinetists, he really formed a relationship with two individuals, Barney Bigard and Jimmy Hamilton, who both played in his band, and he would write different tunes with specific players in mind. And he wrote the Clarinet Lament for Barney Bigard. It also has the subtitle sometimes as Barney's Concerto. And he recorded it a number of times and performed it with Duke Ellington Orchestra. And it's a great chance for me to make believe that I'm playing jazz, but by playing this transcription. And I just love the genre and getting to play the music of Duke Ellington. And then the second one that's called, I think, Air Conditioned Jungle is just breaks, all the speed records, and was written for Jimmy Hamilton, who was probably more in the style of the time of Benny Goodman too, another great virtuoso, Jimmy Hamilton. I listened to recordings of him playing this and thought, wow, do I really want to do this? And I thought, yeah, let's go for it. It's so much fun. It's not on this. It's not on this concert. But there's a whole series of these Duke Ellington pieces that I hope I get to play all of them for you.
That would be wonderful.
Sometime. But Barney's Concerto, it was my favorite, and I'm glad that we got to play some Duke Ellington. So from Mozart to Bassi to Ellington, you have three different worlds, and it's an introduction to why anyone like me or Richard Stoltzman or anyone else who just falls in love with the clarinet wants to do that, because you have so many voices and characters to choose from.
Wonderful. Oh, that's beautiful. I'm excited. I've seen clips and we're all excited to join you next week. So for those of you that are tuning in, that are somewhat new to chamber music, or maybe not, maybe you're an aficionado of our chamber music colleagues locally, let's listen next week for the different eras and storytelling by the clarinet, by the different Mozart, Bassi, and Ellington that David Shifrin here organized and curated for us. We're so excited. So I'm just going to run through the information for everyone one more time. One thing we haven't mentioned is this next week at the Gouge Center, it's a bit of a week of the clarinet, so to speak, because we are starting this next Tuesday. I want to put a little shout out to Megan Castaneda, one of our Auburn music students. She has a student recital this coming Tuesday evening. We will be streaming it live from our stage here at 7:30. You can go onto our website and RSVP and get the link and the information there. And then starting Wednesday evening will be the 5-day streaming of David Shifrin's piece through our partnership with the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center. One of 3 coming this fall, so stay tuned. And then we'll see you later for the masterclass later this month. So thanks for sharing all of your brilliance and your playing and your educational wisdom with our community over this month, David.
Thank you so much for having me. Real pleasure.
Take care. Be well.
Bye.